Mommytrack Daddy Whispers Podcast is now called Birth Agni Podcast.
Hello, you're listening to episode 13 of Mommytrack Daddy Whispers Podcast. I'm your host, Divya, and today we are with Prachi. She's a clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist with over 15 years of experience. And today we have gathered together for discussing certain problems, certain physical factors that affect mental health, apart from the situations and emotional imbalances that we often attach as a cause to it. Prachi, welcome to Mommy Track Daddy Whispers podcast again. And those of you who've heard our episode on mothers and mental health, they know that we gather for odd number of episodes. Prachi, I'm so thrilled to have you here. How are you?
Thank you so much, Divya. It's amazing to be here again. And I really enjoyed our last episode. And like you said, it was number 11, and now we are here for number 13. Let's hope this is lucky number 13.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Prachi, I read a post from you on Instagram where you shared a chat from a client, and therein you explained how seasonal changes or physical factors they affect mental health, as against like I said, emotional imbalances, the situations, the life situations, something somebody said or we said something. We usually attribute all of this to our mental health issues. But that was an eye opener for me. So, would you like to share something about that Instagram chat?
Sure. So I have a young client, and she suffers from something known as cyclothymia. Cyclothymia is a milder version of bipolar disorder, but it is more rapid cycling than bipolar disorder. So the mood swings are more rapid. Like with her, it happens every 2 weeks. So it so happened that we were having a session. So we meet weekly for sessions, and we were talking, and then that day she was okay, but some things she said made me think that she might be getting another depressive episode soon. But I didn't mention it because I kind of did not want to induce it by saying it. So I just kept
Right.
it to myself. And sure enough, the next day she ended up texting me saying that I think I have a low phase coming on. And this was around, I think, November, early November. So fall season had just, started progressing towards winter. So I told her that, I was thinking that this might happen. And this is probably something to do with the weather. Now, we also have a history here because this client of mine had been in the UK last couple of years ago, where she had a very, very serious breakdown. And UK, as you know, is extremely cold. And it was around this same time. So we had a few hypotheses in the sense that, we thought sometimes when anniversaries of significant events roll around in our lives, when I say anniversaries, I don't mean, like date anniversaries, but anniversaries of times where something significant might have happened in your life. So let's say you've had a very bad episode or a very bad meltdown at some point, let's say in some month. So the next year, when that month rolls around, because these memories are all stored in our subconscious, they surface without us realizing, and we get cranky and irritable, and we don't know why it's happening. So since this was around the same time for her also, so we had one hypothesis that probably it's the anniversary of that breakdown, and that's what's causing it, and a couple of other things. But I did have my suspicions about the weather, and I told her that you need to increase your light and warmth because the weather is changing, and that can have an impact on you. And that is what you ended up reading and that's why we are talking about.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about this as we go on.
Right. That was very intriguing to me because at that point in time, I was feeling low for a couple of days, just generally, and did not know why that really had happened. So by the day comes to an end, by the evening time, I was like stressed, irritated by little things. Did not know why that was happening because there was no reason that I could actually attach this thing to. So when I read all of that, I said, okay, lights on, lots of light, windows open and everything, and that did work. Yeah, so before we go on to our second question, I would like to ask you to elaborate on the condition of this, bipolar problem, because many of us might not know what exactly that is.
I'm glad you asked that. I'll tell you about bipolar and I'll tell you a little bit about some related conditions, especially the one that we are talking about here with regards to weather. Actually, as you know, in common language, we've become very savvy with mental health terms in terms of, oh my God, I'm so OCD, I like to keep everything neat. Or mood swings is a term that we very commonly use amongst ourselves, that people end up saying, oh, I am so bipolar. But honestly, bipolar is very, very serious. When I say serious, I mean not in severity, but I'm saying in terms of gravity, in terms of its intensity. Bipolar is a mental illness where, as the name says, bipolar, so two poles. So on one end you have, if I'm talking technical terms, on one hand you have depression, and on the other hand you have something called mania. Depression, as we are aware, it's extreme sadness and low mood and fatigue, easy irritability, low energy, all
Mm.
of that. And on the
Okay.
other hand, mania is a condition which is characterized by extreme energy, extremely happy mood, lack of sleep, or rather, actually, not feeling the need to sleep,
Okay.
feeling that I can do so many tasks suddenly at once, feeling extremely productive, spending a lot of money, indulging in a lot of high risk behaviors. All of that is characterized under mania.
Okay.
So we have bipolar. Primarily, this is what bipolar is, but we have gradations in it. So we have bipolar 1, where you have depression and you have mania. Then we have bipolar 2, which is a swinging between depression and something called hypomania. Hypomania is like a lesser form of mania, where a lot of the negative consequences of mania don't usually happen. In fact, a
Okay.
lot of artists, painters like Van Gogh have produced their best work in hypomanic conditions.
So it does have, you know, good results, but it's
Yes.
actually,
But
it can be traumatic for the person undergoing it.
absolutely, because when the low hits, suddenly everything just seems meaningless. So, what happens with the, if this were a normal situation, you would be productive and you would sustain that. But somebody who's suffering from bipolar disorder would start a project. Let's say if they are hypomanic or manic phase, they will start a project with a lot of enthusiasm, get through halfway, and suddenly, let's say, a low hits, then it just never gets finished. So while they may be very talented and very creative, the creativity just gets hampered because there is such rapid swinging.
And Prachi, like you said, so what I understand from what you just said is we should not start using these terms very frequently
Mhm.
whenever we have a normal high and a low in our
Yeah, very
lives.
lightly actually, without understanding the gravity of it.
Right. And we should actually know that these things, they can be really dark for certain people and the frequency can be extremely high and
Absolutely.
it can be difficult for certain people. Let's not dilute the
Exactly. The problem
problem.
with using these terms lightly is exactly that when somebody is suffering from the actual condition, people tend to assume that this is something that you can just snap out of.
Right. Like a lot of people have started posting that if you have depression, talk about it.
Hmm.
But a lot of people are not in the position to talk about it because they might not
Absolutely.
know
In
where
fact,
they
the
are.
first thing depression does is withdraw you from everyone else. So somebody who's
Right.
suffering from depression is the last person likely to talk about it.
Yeah. And now moving on to our second question. So, from the first thing that we just discussed about the winter season
Hmm.
affecting our moods and everything, is this a part of the textbooks? Does this
Hmm.
come from some research,
Hmm.
or it's out of experience that more and more of what else can affect us? How about things go there?
Right. No, absolutely. It comes from research, and this is actually something in its severe form. This is known in its diagnosable form. Actually, I should say, it is known as seasonal affective disorder.
Okay.
So
Okay.
when we say affective, affect has something to do with mood. Actually, affect is observable mood.
Okay.
So if I ask you, how are you feeling, and you say that, oh, I'm fine, I'm happy, but your face tells me that you're sad. So your reported mood is happy, but your affect is not congruent to what you're reporting.
Okay.
Affect is observable mood. So seasonal
Okay.
affective disorder, basically a mood disorder which is affected by the season changes. It is a very real diagnosis, as you said, and
Okay.
it has a lot of symptoms where again people swing. So if somebody is already suffering from bipolar, then they would in winter season they are more likely to go to depression, and in summer seasons they are more likely to move towards mania or hypomania. I am
Okay.
telling you this because I also have suffered from this at some point in my life. I remember when I was, I think, in my late teens, I
Mm-hmm.
used to have, earlier I had migraine, and then I started having these unexplained headaches in the evening times. And when this weather would change, I would get very weepy and I would just cry and I would not want to talk to anyone, and I will just like just stay in bed, not eat well. All of that would happen. So none of this got registered, but the headaches, yes, they were
Yeah.
bothersome. So we went but we went to a neurologist,
Okay.
and he ended up prescribing antidepressants to me.
Okay.
And when I read the prescription, I could identify the medication because I was already studying about it. And I asked him that why am I being prescribed an antidepressant for a headache? And
Mm.
then he explained that sometimes our moods need some extra boost to level out, and it happens sometimes with the light changes and all of that. So in evenings you're getting it and everything. So that really fascinated me, and I was on that medication for about 6 months. It tapered
Okay.
off, and I was okay. I mean, the headaches went off, but this weather thing stayed. And it's only in the last, I think, 5 6 years that I managed to finally get a handle on it, and now I'm prepared. So for me right now, this is not in a clinical space. Now it is not in that severity that I can be diagnosed with it, but I still feel it, and because I can monitor it, I'm able to control it.
Right. With all the things that you described, like
Right.
increasing more light in the room.
Absolutely. So the light thing happens because our bodies, we have all sorts of internal rhythms, internal regulation systems.
Okay.
So
Okay.
how do we know that we have to go to sleep at night? Because our brain tells us, because it gets dark, right? And
Correct.
even if you have to work or if you have to stay awake all night, you will
Hmm.
still feel sleepy when it's dark out,
Yeah.
right? So that's your body's internal clock telling you that it's time to go to sleep. So in the same
Right.
way, we have a lot of internal rhythms in terms of
Okay.
eating, when to eat, how much to eat, fullness, signals, and all of that. So when the light outside changes and the temperature changes, these rhythms, we call them circadian rhythms,
Okay.
these rhythms get affected. And in people who have already got a tendency for depressive or mood disorders,
Hmm.
this effect is even more because their neurotransmitters are already imbalanced.
Okay. Okay.
So that's how it happens.
Okay. And from this, I come to a question I'm intrigued to ask that, especially for people who live in the northern part of the world,
Hmm.
if I talk about people living near the poles, and especially places like Norway, which has like 6 months sun
Hmm.
and 6 months dark, would they also be affected despite the fact that it's a routine phenomena for them?
That's a very good question. Very interesting. Something I haven't thought of so far, but I'm assuming not so much because they are born into that kind of climate. So their body circadian rhythm is already according to that cycle. So
Okay.
anything that happens out of the ordinary for our normal rhythms, that is what ends up affecting us negatively.
Okay, and like you mentioned on the case on one of the clients that you had, the first thing that we discussed, when she moved to UK,
Hmm.
she went under a meltdown. Probably that could be the reason because she's already inclined to depressive behavior in the
Hmm.
winter season, and UK is really cold.
Yeah, so she had other issues. and
Okay.
it just kept getting worse and worse as the weather, I mean, the weather was a contributing factor, not the only factor, but definitely a contributing factor. So she
Yeah.
had other tendencies also. So if you have tendencies for depression or bipolar mood swings, then weather is something additional you need to watch out for.
Okay. So it may not be the case that it's the only reason that makes you
Yes,
low. It may be a contributing factor to
definitely.
increasing the intensity of where you are in your health. And
Definitely.
it can be also be a symptom that can help you understand that you have that kind of a tendency.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so in India, we have different kinds of seasons. We have like
Mhm.
autumn, we have monsoons, and then sometimes we have sudden winters, sometimes we don't really have winters for very long. What I've seen in terms of how do we adapt ourselves to seasons is we change a lot in the way we eat our food.
Hmm. True.
Does that also affect the way we adapt to seasonal changes, even in terms of mental health?
Definitely. In fact, it's very interesting that you bring up the food angle, because if you realize, or if you kind of, study how our food cultures are divided according to region, every region has a particular kind of food type which is native to that region, and these things are very much influenced by the weather of that particular region. So you have a lot of rice eaters in South India, and
Right,
you have a lot of spice which is eaten in Rajasthan,
right,
based on that, because how the weather of that region was, that's where first, of course, the crop growth will be affected. That's one. Second, how, what food will regulate your body temperature in what region. So the colder regions will have foods which are more warmth producing. The hotter
right,
regions will have, like, rice has a cooling tendency, and south is very hot. So food anyway naturally is distribute, it's only now that we can get access to any kind of food anywhere at any season, which is
right.
also not healthy. But
Yeah,
we just eat everything. But if you look at the traditional food habits, they are naturally designed in a way to give you optimum benefit according to the region where you live in. And when we talk about weather change, yes, we do in India have a large variety of variations that happen. And how we change our food habits definitely impacts that, because there's a lot of recent research which has come in, which does clearly establish a link between food and mood.
right. And they say, very commonly, we say whenever we are stressed, we eat. So that's called stress eating.
Yes, that's emotional eating and stress eating.
Right. And we end up being all the more low.
Yes, because you
Okay.
get trapped in this cycle of guilt and disappointment. In fact, I'm currently working with a dietitian on a program, because we get so many people, and I've also experienced this myself, that who will try all kinds of diets but will find it so hard to stick to a diet, right? It's so hard. And I've been just studying this phenomena for such a long time, and I realized that it's not that you fail the diet fails you, because we are looking at it all wrong. So when we are dieting or trying to eat a certain kind of food, we are doing it more out of fear rather than feel good.
Absolutely. We want to reach somewhere very quick.
Absolutely. If you can train your brain, then you can stick to any diet that you want to follow.
Okay. So that would be a sustainable way to have a good mental health as well as physical health because,
Absolutely.
okay. So because all of that is connected.
Yes.
Okay. Would be waiting to see that because
Yes, we are
that would be
launching this in the new year, because
okay.
we know that a lot of people are going to be making healthy resolutions in the new year, and I'm hoping that this can help.
Yeah, and that stays long, not just in the month of January or a week into
Absolutely.
January, because we're talking about sustainable health here,
Yeah.
not just the weight and the scales.
Correct.
So, Prachi, we just discussed the importance of food when it comes to our mental health, the importance of physical factors like food and seasonal changes, sudden weather changes. I wanted to ask now, we've been talking in terms of adults so far. I wanted to ask, does all of that affect the way our children behave sometimes? Because when seasons change, we don't really allow them to feel any of that. We actually, get them covered with lots of clothes, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's too much. They don't want all of that, or probably with the season changes, they might not want to have some kind of a food. So does all these factors also contribute to their moods?
Hmm. Yeah. What you just said reminded me of this joke I had read once, that how many clothes a child is wearing is a function of how cold the mother is feeling plus one layer.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's the base I also, keep. So I'm feeling really cold. Okay, put one more layer on my child.
Yeah. So we do that, and well, it is important to a certain extent because children also do not have the capability to look at the big picture and anticipate falling sick.
Yeah.
So yes, we do have to take care of that. But that said, children's bodies also are pretty adept at self-regulation. While we do need to cover them up in winters, and there are a lot of fussy children who will not wear woolens and everything,
Wow.
and things like, if you're sweating, then immediately you will not get exposed to air and all. Yes, we have to protect that. But otherwise, like in a general sense, children's bodies also are very good at self-regulation. And when I say self regulation, not just because of the cold and the hot, but also in terms of the food, because of a lot of behavioral ups and downs that food habits turn into power struggles with between parents and kids. But otherwise, if you just
Uh,
naturally let it adapt in the beginning, very very beginning, when children start eating solid food, body knows when and how much it wants to eat. But it's just that it becomes such a vicious cycle right from the beginning that I don't even want to go there. It's very hard to solve. But yeah, coming back to your question about whether children get affected, yes, they also do, because, like I mentioned, the light system or the internal rhythms have to do with how our brains are wired and how our internal regulation system is. So जैसे हमें पता है कि अंधेरा हो रहा है तो हमको वो बॉडी में सुस्ती आई जाती है, आपको पता
mm,
होता है कि ये सोने का टाइम है, आपकी बॉडी को इंटरनली पता है। तो
mm.
विंटर मंथ्स में क्या होता है, सनलाइट अगर नहीं है एंड पूरा दिन जैसे डार्क डार्क सा है, तो वो इंटरनल क्लॉक आपकी वो ही रीड कर रही है, इट इज नॉट getting enough light to be able to get you in that alert state. So you are drowsy all day, you're lethargic all day because your brain is constantly
Uh,
secreting that chemical which is supposed to put you to sleep.
and oversleeping and everything.
Yes. So then obviously, and you're not, if you're lethargic all day, then you're not productive enough during your daytime. So that makes you irritable. And आपको समझ में नहीं आता कि अब मैं मुझे ये करना है तो फिर मैं कैसे करूँ, फिर चिड़चिड़ापन and all of that becomes interrelated. So that's why we recommend कि अगर winter sunlight है, enough sunlight अगर है तो अच्छी बात है, then you should get exposed to it and not stay cold inside. Because नेचुरली ऑल्सो अगर आप देखो तो रात का टेम्परेचर दिन के टेम्परेचर से कम होता है, तो बॉडी वो भी रीड कर रही है। विंटर का टाइम है, आप बाहर अगर धूप है भी लेकिन आप घर के अंदर ही बैठे हो, तो आपकी बॉडी सिर्फ लो
Hmm.
टेम्परेचर रीड कर रही है,
Right. So it's
राइट?
important to go out, get some sunlight.
एब्सोल्युटली, बिकॉज इफ इट्स रीडिंग लो टेम्परेचर इट इज अज्यूमिंग दैट इट इज नाइट टाइम,
Ah, right.
right? So you need to get out and expose it to the sunlight, very very important. If there is no sun, sometimes नॉर्थ में तो स्पेशली हमारे मतलब 15-15 दिन धूप नहीं निकलती है, तो आप घर पे आई ऑलवेज सजेस्ट कि विंटर आने से पहले अरेंज फॉर एक्स्ट्रा लाइटिंग, मोर ट्यूब लाइट्स, मोर वार्म लाइट, येलो लाइट। एंड आजकल वो हेलोजन वाले हीटर्स आते हैं, दे आर माय फेवरेट्स बिकॉज दे हैव अ लॉट ऑफ लाइट एज वेल एज वार्मथ, एंड इट काइंड ऑफ सिमुलेट्स वो फायर प्लेस वाला इफेक्ट, सो दैट रियली वर्क्स वंडर्स। आप उसमें बैठो, यू फील वेरी वार्म कोजी, एंड विंटर में
Hmm.
तो ज्यादा, बिकॉज यू नीड टू kind of keep your internal clock well synced. So
Well
that's why,
synced.
because अंधेरा भी जल्दी हो जाता है ना, like आजकल तो by 6 o'clock it's dark.
Hi, it's dark. It's
Yeah.
dark. We inside have our lights on at by
Yeah,
11 in the night, तो हमें पता नहीं पड़ता. But yeah, agree.
exactly.
And if I go to this area where I say that sometimes I observe people and I have a mental image of certain people that I know, you know certain people would take a little bit more stress
Hmm.
in their in a particular situation. Say I have a situation, I'm planning something or in anything like that, and I have to engage with a couple of people. I know, okay, this person would in that situation maybe take a little bit more stress than others. So
Mm-hmm.
is we've been talking about all the factors contributing to our mental health, but does it also come from somewhere, the genetics, the way we are, our own inclination to how we perceive things?
Hmm.
Does it also come from there? So certain people are more inclined to stress, if
Hmm.
I ask you that
Hmm.
way. Certain people are less.
Hmm.
So is there a phenomena that can explain us as to why that is, if not by how that is?
Right. Yeah, there is something known as diathesis stress model, which we studied when we study psychopathology. This model tells us that we have the capability of inheriting a genetic vulnerability to certain mental health conditions. How much
Okay.
vulnerability, or what is known as genetic loading, depends on the disorder and the condition. Some disorders have high genetic loading, some not so much. But yes, you can inherit a genetic vulnerability to certain mental health conditions like depression, like schizophrenia, like bipolar, and anxiety also to a certain extent. But what the model tells us is that so this genetic vulnerability is like a dormant switch inside us. So
Okay.
it may or may not get activated. What will activate it is adverse life conditions. So where if you are, let's say, born with a vulnerability, but you've had a very secure childhood and a very secure growing environment, and you've not really encountered any adverse conditions, so you may never develop that disorder. That switch will stay dormant. But if you're born with a
Okay.
vulnerability and you end up growing up in an environment which is also not conducive to a good growth, then you are more likely to develop. Now, this can also happen in a way that, let's say, for example, a child is born to a bipolar father. Okay,
Okay.
so genetic loading तो रहेगा ही, but उसके अलावा, and that is why it is so hard to do these studies, because you really can't say whether it is one thing or the other. Now if we don't assume that there is any genetic loading, वो बच्चा जिस फादर के साथ बड़ा हो रहा है, द फादर इज अनप्रिडिक्टेबल, कभी भी कोई भी मूड आ सकता है, तो बच्चे की लाइफ में कॉन्स्टेंटली अनसर्टेनिटी है, एंड द चाइल्ड इज ग्रोइंग अप सीइंग हिज फादर समटाइम्स वेरी लो, समटाइम्स वेरी हाई, not knowing what to expect, when to expect. Now this thing will also result in an emotional reaction in the child, so the child will also grow up with mood swings, because the
Right.
child will try to adapt to the father's moods. तो
Yeah.
वो आप इतने लंबे टाइम तक आपके ही मूड इतने ऊपर नीचे हो रहे हैं, तो फिर आपकी टेंडेंसी वैसे ही हो जाती है टू डेवलप बाइपोलर लेटर ऑन.
Right. So it's very difficult to separate this, say in the condition like you mentioned, but sometimes when it has come in the genetic loading from somebody who's not living with you, probably if you've had a good childhood where your needs were taken care of, where you were allowed to be an individual rather than just
Hmm.
being seen as a child with, imbalanced emotions,
Hmm.
that ways they might never surface. So there's still a
Yes.
hope that children should be dealt with, considering the fact that they're not emotionally mature. They're only exploring their emotions,
Hmm.
and that's what they use to talk and express themselves. So if they're feeling warm, they'll rather be cranky and
Hmm.
making life tough for you, but they're not doing it intentionally. So we have to, it's a very difficult job for a parent to do, but that's a very hopeful thing that you've just mentioned. And it kind of reinforces my faith in the fact that we need to take care of the emotional health of the children a lot more than we need to teach them A, B, and C.
Absolutely, 100%. Because the only thing that the child doesn't have is a wider vocabulary to tell you what they are feeling. But they are feeling the same emotions as you do. It's just that they don't have enough vocabulary for it. And as parents, if you can understand that or accept that my child has emotional autonomy, that's very very important, because हम अज्यूम करने लगते हैं कि मेरे बच्चे को ये लग रहा है, बट he or she can understand his or her own emotions. Maybe they don't have enough vocabulary to tell you exactly, but they can. So, what's important, like you said, is absolutely to trust that the child knows what he or she is feeling and then go from there. So, instead of trying to project your own emotions or your own thoughts onto the child, approach the child from a place of curiosity, not from a place of of authority.
Right. And they actually confuse them in the end that they're not able to recognize their own emotions growing up and end up being an adult who's confused as to why do
Exactly.
they feel, yeah, insecure, or maybe why aren't they able to take care of themselves, because they were never given a ground where they could themselves go back and find out why they feel what they do, because they need help and support there to figure out why they're feeling what they're feeling, but they know what they're feeling
Exactly, that's a beautiful point, because we all tend to, as parents, we don't realize we tend to deny children's realities. If
all
a
the time.
child is saying that मेरे को ऐसा लग रहा है, नहीं नहीं तुमको ऐसा नहीं लग रहा है, तुमको कुछ कुछ भी लगता है, तुमको ऐसा नहीं होता है, ये गलत देखा होगा तुमने, या तुम गलत समझे होगे, ऐसा नहीं. अरे,
uh,
you are denying the child's reality, and if you do that, the child is going to end up doubting his or her own reality and emotions, like you exactly said, that they grow up into confused adults, not knowing whether to trust what they are feeling or not to trust, and that just doesn't work well in adult relationships.
Yeah, and also, I'm going off track, but also in the sense, especially in the cases of sexual behaviors,
Hmm.
or what they feel sexually with
Hmm.
certain people, I've seen a lot of the times while growing up, if I raised a concern that I don't like staying with somebody in the same room,
Hmm.
probably. I don't know why I feel that,
Yes.
but I've expressed that to maybe parents or maybe elders, maybe school teachers,
Hmm.
anybody.
Hmm.
And I've always been, and this is coming from a personal example, we've always been told, oh, you're growing up, you're in your teenage, you
Hmm.
can build things up in your brain. Rather than asking where the problem is, what instance actually made you feel that? Can you
Yes.
go back there and figure out? So it's important to, the only thing that I can take from this is that if we listen to our children as an equal individual on the emotional level,
Hmm.
slightly immature but still an equal individual, I think we can actually be able to solve a lot of their problems and give them an ecosystem where they grow up a lot more confident, a lot more secure emotionally. They're secure in all other ways, but probably not emotionally.
Yeah, emotionally healthy, and absolutely you're right that to approach them as equal individuals. So it's a simple example that I give parents sometimes is this: that if you met someone who speaks a different language, an adult who speaks a different language, right?
Right.
Let's say somebody from Russia just comes in and is asking you something. You will put in all your efforts to understand what this person is trying to convey, even if you don't understand the language, right? You will use gestures, you will use demonstrations, you will use pictures, and all of that, just to figure out what this person is trying to ask you or tell you. Treat your children
Right.
exactly like that.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy, though. So, I'm gonna pin that thought right there for all of us to go back to time and again when we're dealing with our
Yeah.
children. And okay, from here I can derive this one statement that I also read in a book, that if from all that we discussed, all the physical factors affecting our mental health, but at the end of the day, we live our entire lives in our brains.
Hmm.
Is that statement accurate, or what do you have to say to that?
I think it's pretty accurate. The whole, I think, majority of the time we are living in our own heads, and we encounter this so many times during the day also. कि जो actual event होता है, वो तो कुछ मिनटों या मे बी कुछ घंटों के लिए ही होता है, लेकिन उस
Mm,
इवेंट की जो प्रोसेसिंग होती है हमारे माइंड में वो दिनों तक चलती है, कई बार महीनों और सालों तक चलती है. So
absolutely.
event has already come and gone, but you're living inside your head. Literally, you're still there with it long after it has gone.
Right.
So in that sense, yes, it's true that we live inside our brains, and the human body is a marvelous, miraculous thing, right?
Yeah.
It has so many complicated, complex procedures going on with every blink of an eye that we can't even imagine. And same with the brain. Everything we
Yeah.
do is a result of electrical firing in our brains.
Yeah. It's very simple to say that.
Yeah.
Very complex to comprehend.
Imagine, I mean, if I just lift my finger, imagine the precision of the firing that would have to happen in a particular kind of neuron to exactly make that action happen. Something so simple as lifting a finger or pointing a finger. This is like
Right.
the simplest gesture, and so many complicated things we do throughout the day. We do so much skilled work. We are recording a podcast today. This has taken such a series of steps to happen. And for
Yeah.
each step, there would have to be a specialized firing in our brain for it to make it happen.
Right. And if I actually say that in this form, that when it comes to physical factors affecting our mental health, it's still everything in our brain.
Hmm.
It may not just not be an emotional episode, but it's still everything that's happening in the brain, even if the physical factors are creating an imbalance in the emotional, in the way we
Hmm.
feel emotionally, it's still somewhere, affecting our brain. It's
Yes.
creating,
Physically, it is affecting it. Biologically, it is affecting it.
yeah, so it's all in the brain. At the end of the day, we are just bodies being worked by the brain.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to like really simplify it, we can say that because so actually it's an interdependent relationship,
Okay.
right? So let's say something traumatic is happening in my life. I'm going through a particularly traumatic incident. Then so many things are happening because so when trauma occurs, my brain reacts to threat, which is a completely different mechanism. And you'll be surprised to know that, and that is why people who have encountered serious traumas have so much trouble recovering from them without therapeutic help. And every time they think of it, it's like it's happening right now. Because even now, research has MRIs have proven that whatever happens in a traumatic incident gets recorded in our brains in the here and now section of the brain. So we have a section where long term memories go, and then we have a section where here and now happens. So
Okay.
traumatic memories go there, they don't go into the long term memory. So not
Ah,
every incident is traumatic. So if you look back on your life, you might want to think about a bad memory. So you will think about it and you'll be like, yeah, that happened, that was really sad, but you're not really feeling it right now. But if you remember or recall something traumatic, it feels like you're reliving it right now. And that's very, very biologically happening because you're literally reliving it because it's recorded in a different center of your brain.
so when we talk about these illnesses, say
Hmm.
cancer, that we do not really know a cause of, and I was listening to the podcast from Dr. Chatterjee,
Hmm.
where he mentioned that certain illnesses, when they surface,
Hmm.
there's always a history of series of problems that have led to it,
Hmm.
and they're mostly related to anxiety and stress, and something that has been, creating imbalances in our mental health,
Hmm.
but we did not really recognize it right then.
Hmm.
So when we talk about reliving our trauma,
Hmm.
can it actually, when we don't really recognize it, when it was just in the brain, when it starts surfacing as a part, as some issue in our body, then we actually start looking at it and we don't really know why it happened.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. And that is where psychotherapy comes in because it helps you explore that. Because so many times, if something has happened, like let's say in early childhood, our brains are very powerful at protecting themselves. So they will just repress it and block it. You
Right.
wouldn't even know. And there is something known as conversion disorder in psychology where A psychological symptom is converted into a physical symptom. In fact, a lot of these incidents of possession that you see
Mhm.
in rural India happening,
Yes.
spirit possession and all of that, a
Yeah, yeah,
lot of
yeah.
it is conversion. Unexplained blindness, unexplained paralysis, which has absolutely no physical correlate. All of this can be perpetrated by a psychological repressed memory.
Okay, and it's not really a possession. It's just your brain working in not in a normal way or in a way that you would expect it to, and then it shows that problem in a physical form.
Absolutely. A lot of it. I'm not saying, well, I'm a deep believer in paranormal and the supernatural. So I'm not saying that
Mhm.
100% of the time, but yes, a lot of the times it's our brain trying to manifest something which is repressed in a way which is more socially acceptable.
Okay.
So
Okay, and
I'll give you
that's
an example. Like we had this case of a girl who came in who had suddenly gone blind. Little girl, 10-year-old.
oh my god.
And we were all like, all tests, everything. Her parents were going crazy because, nothing, they could not discover anything physically wrong with her. And when she came to our, I was a trainee then. And when she came to our department, and then we started exploring this psychoanalytically, where, what could have happened. And then, so the idea is that usually the part of your body from where you have experienced the conflict, psychological conflict, is the one that gets affected. So given the fact that she had gone blind, we started with the hypothesis that she's probably seen something which is extremely conflicting for her. And
That's
it turned out, we kept digging, and it turned out that it was a joint family and everything, and a lot of people used to live together and all of that, and in a small space. And she had, for the first time, witnessed her parents at night in a sexual relationship.
okay, and she did not express it, and it was she took it in a very negative way.
Yeah, because it's a child. You don't know how they are going
Yeah.
to interpret what they are looking at, right? And how nobody knows what she would have interpreted. And she saw it, and then it was too much for the mind to process, for her child's mind to process. So the brain converted it into something acceptable. That now I'm blind, I can't see anything. I will never see anything conflicting again. Something like that.
So it was a protective mechanism for
Yes,
the body.
exactly, exactly. So then when we started exploring this in therapy, and we brought this out, and we obviously had, went deeper with the child, and then she got cured. Once the conflict was faced, and, the whole repressed memory was brought out, her vision recovered.
And which is why it is so important to talk to our children,
Yes.
keep exploring what they're not saying out of fear. And you know one of the things that we've all gone through अपने बचपन में कि हमें बहुत डराया जाता था,
Hmm.
ये करोगे तो मार पड़ेगी, वो
Hmm.
बोलोगे तो मार पड़ेगी. If we adapt a parenting style where we inculcate fear in the children that
Yes.
they'll be punished for doing something rather than speaking up and facing what they're doing right and wrong,
Hmm.
and taking a small amount of time to come out of it
Hmm.
rather than just cover it with the fear, or rather bury it. Let our children explore themselves and speak out,
True.
rather have them fearless, shameless.
True, because children, they start registering things right from infancy. We think that children are small and, they don't understand things. They may not process what they have seen or heard, but they feel all the emotions, and they start registering things. Like, for things like, personality disorders and all, we have traced origins to just a few days old, while the child himself or herself does not have memory of it. When you go, and obviously we are looking at the family of origin and all of that, and you go deeper, and you will find origins as early as that. The lot of people have this fear of abandonment, fear of being
Mm.
lonely. A lot of it can be traced to, like, the first few months, where you would not even think that the child is registering something, but they are registering everything on an emotional level, and it's leaving long lasting imprints. But here I would like to say a word of caution also, that I
Mm.
don't want parents to get scared. और
Yeah.
ओवर कॉशियस,
Yeah.
एंड वो भी होता है बिकॉज हम मतलब जब ये चीज़ों का अवेयरनेस थोड़ा बढ़ने लगता है तो फिर हम अपने लिए बहुत ज़्यादा ओवर कॉशियस हो जाते हैं एंड वी स्टार्ट guarding everything that we are saying or we start assessing everything that we are saying to the child. वो भी ज़रूरी नहीं है. Just be authentic, but be nurturing, be curious, and know or always remember that you are raising the child. You haven't created him or her. While they have come from you, you haven't created them. They have
Right.
come with their own persona.
Yeah. Their
So
own
rather,
personality.
so rather than trying to mold them into something that you want them to be, a better stance is to just watch your child every day and try to learn who they are. It's a wonderful place to start from. Let me see, just approach like a scientist does, when they see this new something new specimen in the environment, no? It's like that कि ये
Yeah.
क्या करता है, कैसे बिहेव
Mm.
करता है, कैसे रिएक्ट करता है. Just approach from a place of curiosity and you'll be set. You will not do anything wrong.
Yeah. And it will be a lot more fun. And
Fun, yes, it's fun. So much less headache for you frantically trying to make your child do something. अरे छोड़ ही दो, देखो तो वो क्या करता है, उसमें ही मजा आता है.
absolutely. And, nature unfolding in so many beautiful ways.
Beautiful.
I agree with that. And on that note, I would ask you to give us certain tips. Now, we've talked about the factors, physical factors. We've talked about how everything actually goes down to how our brain perceives it. We have talked about problems in the brain that actually come out in physical form and how important it is to, give our children a loving emotional space for them to grow up without getting scared.
Hmm.
And and now I'd like to ask you, if we were to take care of our mental health on a day-to-day basis,
Hmm.
to take care of our children's mental health on a day-to-day basis, what would be those important points that you would like to, bring to us to be able to do that on a day-to-day basis?
Hmm. Couple of them we've already discussed, talking about coming from a place of curiosity and approaching with an open mind rather than trying
Mm.
to project your own emotions. Um, some of the other things that can be done is if you can just schedule 15-20 minutes a day to talk with your children. Just talk like you
Mm.
would catch up with a friend for coffee. In the same way, just talk to your child just for 15 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be about anything specific. Please don't ask them about homework. Please don't ask them about their progress in class because you anyway do it the entire day.
Yeah.
This time is to be used to listen, really listen, not hear, but listen.
Mhm.
So, you just sit down and like, it could be anything. Let's say the child drew something today and you just genuinely look at it with open mind and not from a point of view कि अरे यार इसमें ये कलर यूज करता तो ज्यादा अच्छा होता. Not like that,
Mm.
but just sit down and ask the child, hey, what did you draw today, and what were you thinking about when you were drawing this, or what was the most fun thing you did today, or what was something that made you happy today or something that made you sad today, and really listen to their responses. It just takes 15-20 minutes, but trust me, it's going to build such a deep bond with your child because the whole day you are so busy being a parent
Mm.
that you forget that you are both two humans also who need to connect.
Yes. And you also know कि मुझ पे गया है या पापा पे गया है.
हाँ. Exactly. बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. तो yes, and children have that sense also, उनको पता होता है कि किससे कैसे बात करनी है. Like, my son, if he has to ask something technical, he will just go to his dad, and if he wants to talk about something emotional, he'll come to me.
That kind of a bond gets created.
हाँ, और इतनी उसको मतलब है सेंस, बच्चों में होती ही है.
Mm-hmm.
Another tip I really want to, and It's not that hard to inculcate, and I would really love it if people can start doing that, is to build an emotional vocabulary for children,
Okay. In what ways?
to give them emotion words every day, 4 or 5 words. Look up, you'll get a lot of lists on the internet where you can just search for emotion words. You
Mm-hmm.
can get them in pictorial form also, you can get them in word form also, whatever your child likes, if your child is a visual learner or an auditory learner. And every day, just 3 or 4 words, just sit down and practice with them what it looks like. You never know, you yourself might end up getting surprised as to how many emotions there are that you don't even know. We just know sad, bad, mad,
Yeah.
honestly speaking.
Yeah. Angry, for one.
हाँ, तो mad, that's mad,
Right. Yeah.
है ना?
Getting mad at everybody.
सैड,
Yeah.
बैड, मैड, यही हमको पता है। आप किसी को भी पूछ लो, एडल्ट्स को आजकल पूछ लो कि व्हाट इज़ द इमोशन दैट यू आर फीलिंग, यही 3 कैटेगरीज़ में से कुछ बोलेंगे।
Hmm. Hmm.
दैट्स बिकॉज़
Agree.
हमको कोई नहीं सिखाता इमोशनल वोकैब्युलरी, एंड देयर आर सो मेनी इमोशंस। देयर इज़ शेम, देयर इज़ गिल्ट, देयर इज़ एन्वी एंड जेलसी एंड लव एंड जॉय एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So just start introducing 2 to 3 emotion words and make it a make it an activity that both of you can do.
Hmm.
So
And
that
probably learn
yours also
along.
increases and the child तो उसका तो खैर हो ही जाएगा। तो
Huh.
इससे दूसरा प्रॉब्लम ये सॉल्व होगा कि when the child is trying to tell you something, they have a larger repertoire of words to explain what they are trying to say. So the communication gets better.
That is such a wonderful technique. And I have to tell you, I'm hearing this for the first time. That's so important.
It
And I'm so
is.
glad that you've shared this with us. I will definitely do that.
Yeah, and you can find a lot of good smiley types and pictorial type representations of these emotions. Another fun thing to add to this is also sign language. So there are simple words in sign language if you look up, uh,
Mhm.
grumpy and irritable and
Mm.
mad and angry and all of that. And you can just learn that and practice that also. So sometimes the child doesn't want to speak, they are so upset they don't want to speak.
Ah,
So you can
huh.
just tell them that why don't you sign it to me and let me understand what's happening with you.
That's so
That's it.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
मैं भी सीख जाऊँगी एक
हाँ.
language that way. Okay, so on that note, Prachi, thank you so much for coming on board. It was, as usual, a very informative episode. I really want to take it longer and keep having this discussion with you, but then we are bound by time.
Of course. And we don't want people falling asleep in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely not. I want them to share the episode and share this information with as many people as possible.
Yes.
And on that note, Prachi, again, thank you. I would love to have you, again on the episode because I love talking to you. And I was to say this that it's such a strong virtual connect with you, Prachi, because we've not met.
Yeah.
And like we discussed, we have so many things in common: a common friend, a common place of birth, and you know that ways we have so many things in common. So it's such a strong virtual connect.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you so much, Divya. It's always lovely being here and talking to you. And you always ask such thought provoking questions that, I also love racking my brain over it and giving you answers for it. So I'm really hoping that everybody who's listening to us will also have a good time listening to it and take something away from it which helps them. And yes, please share as much as you can, because these things that Divya talks about are extremely important as a parent. And unfortunately nobody really coaches parents anywhere, so this is a great spot to get some information from that. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm learning along, learning from you as our connect becomes stronger. On that note, we'll go to the parenting tip of the episode. I want to talk to you, parents. We are coming to the end of the year. This year had its own ups and downs, and we had a lot of plans for 2021. The way we looked at it was that everything might change in the coming year. But as we prep for holidays, for Christmas, for this season, the season of warmth, let us know that things might not dramatically change in the coming year. Let us enjoy with our children, let us enjoy ourselves with our family, making sure that our mental health is still taken care of. What I mean to say by that is that you keep the preparations non exhaustive, you keep the celebrations cozy with your family, enjoy the time, but don't pressurize yourself and go into an adrenaline rush and do something overboard and then get into a low mood, because again, it's the winter season, and these factors, they do affect us. So I want you to have a cozy, warm, happy ending to the year and a very warm welcome to the new year, and please be realistic and have wonderful expectations from 2021 and realistic one. On that note, lots of love, and thank you, Prachi, extending the same to you.
Thank you, Divya. Same to you. And
Thank
same to all the listeners.
Yep. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
Stay tuned. Keep listening. Keep sharing.